breaking and entering, drunk and disorderly, law and order. A former prosecutor and a defence lawyer, not your typical pairing. And the result? Conversations about crime and punishment that are guaranteed to get you thinking.
Welcome to Justice Matters with Joe Crowley and Lizzie Green, a brand new weekly podcast. Our episodes are available on Apple Podcast, Spotify and YouTube. Check out our Instagram for clips at Justice Matters Pod. Enjoy the episode. This episode contains descriptions of violence, including violence against women and children. It also contains discussions of suicide. Listener discretion is advised. All right. Hello, Lizzie.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I am well.
Good.
Welcome back to this episode. The follow-on from our first episode where you were talking about the
violence against women, toxic masculinity, domestic violence.
Domestic violence, that's right. And you had some particular examples from the case of
Hannah Clark, Lily James.
Yes, Lily James, yes. But we're going to move on slightly now. Related topic. Because it's continued discussion of domestic violence.
Yes. I wanted to just explore it in a little bit more detail. There's a lot that I would like to talk about with domestic violence, but I've tried not to be too broad. It's one aspect.
Okay. And I think at the end of the last episode, you mentioned you'd found this list from South Australia.
Yes, a list of questions. So I'm gonna take you through those.
Let's jump into that.
All right. I came across a new self-assessment questionnaire that's been created to help men recognise any tendencies they might have towards domestic violence, because whatever else we think, the rate of intimate partner violence is absolutely out of control, and we need to find some way to reduce this statistic. We have to,
I agree we need to find a way of reducing the statistic. I'm not sure I agree it's absolutely out of control. I think that might be overcooking
One woman a week, you think that's acceptable?
Well, I don't think it's acceptable, no. I think it should be 0 women a week. But to say that it's absolutely out of control, that's taking a statistic way out of context. I mean, how many married couples are there in Australia? You say it's absolutely out of control. I mean, it is too high, absolutely. Something should be done about it, absolutely. I totally agree with both those.
So is that not semantics, that too high?
No, it's not semantic. These, I think the words you use are important. And I think particularly around this topic, which is an incredibly emotional topic. And I think that it's important that we try and be careful with the words we use, and we try and use words that are not too emotive. And I think absolutely out of control is just too emotive.
It needs to be addressed. But can I tell you the questions?
Yes, tell us some DV stats.
Okay. So this is actually from the South Australian state government funded initiative. So it poses 7 questions, and the idea is if they answer yes to any of them, then they are urged to call a domestic violence hotline to discuss. So these are the questions. Do you think there are right and wrong ways a woman should behave in a relationship? Second question, do you ever become anxious, annoyed or suspicious if you don't know where your partner is? Third question, have you ever checked your partner's phone, social media or email accounts? Do you ever raise your voice, shout or grab your partner to make a point? Have you ever pushed, grabbed or hit your partner? Have you ever punished your partner for something you feel they've done wrong? Has anyone ever suggested that you change your behaviour towards your partner? And so this government-funded initiative says if you or someone you know could answer yes to any of the above, it might be worth a call to our hotline.
I think everybody I know could answer yes to at least one of those.
But so,
with the exception of checking mobile phones, I mean, all of it sounds like pretty ordinary behaviour in a long-term committed relationship.
Did you want the number?
Can you give it to me? I better call. I mean, you say it's government funded, and that's terrific. That doesn't, in my opinion, add any weight to it whatsoever. I would love to see the empirical evidence behind the usefulness of those questions.
I agree that these questions are super broad and people would be able to say yes. But if all it does is make people think, oh my God, if that's an indicator of potential violence, maybe I should dial it back. Like, if this is something that makes people think, whatever we're doing to address domestic violence isn't actually having much of an impact. So
I don't know that that's the case.
Well,
as you know, reporting rates for domestic violence, are increasing. People are more aware of it. They're reporting it more. So the idea that domestic violence itself is increasing, maybe, and it might not be too, but it may be an indication of increase in reporting rates.
That's probably true, but I also think that the number of murders is, like, I can't believe that many murders were not reported or known in the past. Like, I think the number of murders, I think the degree of violence is escalating.
You think intimate partner homicide is on the increase?
And I think the degree of...
So I don't understand what
you know, like when we think about DV back in the pre-sharing stage where people kept it a secret because it was shameful, it was a family thing, I'm not sure we had as many murders at that time, or perhaps even as many serious incidents. And part of that, I think, is because we know now that the highest risk time is when a woman takes the step to leave or to stand up to the partner. And I think back in the day, women took it. They didn't talk about it. They didn't fight back.
They didn't leave.
So I think with an awareness and an understanding of domestic violence has come this encouragement of victims to speak up and to take action. And that has had the consequence for many women of increased violence and death in certain cases. And so it's like a step forward in terms of awareness, but a step back in terms of the types of harm and the incidents of harm. And so if there is anything that makes anyone take pause and think, or even if there's a woman who reads that list and says, my partner checks my phone, or my partner tells me what to wear.
I think, if your partner's checking your phone, that's a red flag in my view, or grabbing you. I think that's during an argument, that's a red flag. You know, have you ever punished your partner for doing something that annoys you?
It says punished.
Yeah, exactly. That could be anything. That could be not speaking to them for a week. You know, I mean, it is so broad as to be, I think, completely useless. The more general it is, the more useless it is. It should be very specific.
Isn't part of this, like, this is why people fall into or become part of abusive relationships, because it doesn't start with abuse. It doesn't start with violence. It starts with all the love bombing and the good stuff to suck them in. And so when you say it's so broad, if you can see those signs early, you can get out.
So you can see what signs early, that you have an argument with someone and they don't talk to you for a few days because they're annoyed with you and they are punishing you. You know, they don't take the rubbish out, which is their usual job, because they're punishing you.
Well,
I mean,
you're telling us a lot about your marriage, Joe.
I mean, that is not a male only thing. I mean, that
No. And I think there you're going for the very lowest type.
That was the question you read. It just used the word punish. It could have been anything. It didn't say use violence. If it said use violence, that would make it a very different, I think, much more reliable
punished for something
question.
They've done wrong, I think that's different to getting in a strop. And, you know, like if you have...
Well, where does it say that on there? Where's the little explanation in the question?
For something they've done wrong.
Yeah, that you perceive that they've done wrong. Absolutely, yeah. You're hardly gonna punish them for things you don't think they've done wrong.
And I'm not saying every person who says yes to this is an abuser, but I'm saying...
But that's what they're saying. You should get yourself checked out. I mean, that's ridiculous.
If all this does is to make people aware of things that could potentially be red flags, Joe.
That list is equally applicable to women. Okay, there's
fine.
Nothing gender specific in that list. So I mean, let's all
that's right. But I'm not saying that women can't be abusers, but let's be frank, the statistics are that it is always men.
Sure, you're using the word abuse in terms of physical abuse, and I agree with that. But, you know, women are just as capable of being emotional abusers as men.
But I read this list and I thought, oh, gosh, that's interesting. I'm a woman and I think, why are we not... Like, I don't think it can ever be a bad thing that these types of considerations, you read that list in its entirety. Okay, sure, maybe you have punished, you know, by not taking out the rubbish or whatever. But if you think, oh, there's a couple there, you know, like if all it does is raise more awareness, if it makes you think twice before you
The law cannot make people be nice to each other. People being mean to each other, even when they're in an intimate relationship, is ordinary human behaviour. Now, we would hope it doesn't happen.
We're trying to find a way.
All that was a list of people being, with the exception possibly of looking at somebody's phone, which sounds like some level of phones, or grabbing somebody. The rest of it was just ordinary human disputes between people.
But are you saying that because you're in a healthy relationship? Like, if you are not in a healthy relationship, if there are things that don't feel right and you have the benefit of reading a list like this and it says to you, oh my God, if these are things that could indicate DV and you get out early, then hasn't that achieved its goal? Like, we need awareness, understanding.
Yes, it is achieved. In that, if you are somebody who doesn't understand, human relationships you're so ignorant to the extent that you need that list to help.
That's offensive.
Well, I just think
that is offensive because there are a lot of victims. There are a lot of victims who end up feeling stupid because of attitudes like that. Because people say, well, how did you not know? Why didn't you leave?
Sorry, in terms of things like looking at their phones and surveillance, I totally agree with that. But in terms of, punishing you for things you've done wrong because they don't talk to you for 2 days.
What is that? And wrong way that a woman should behave in a relationship, becoming anxious, annoyed, or suspicious if you don't know where your partner is.
Suspicious is problematic.
I think both of those are problematic. I think.
But they group the three of them in the question. Anxious? Have you never been anxious when you didn't know where your partner was? Of course you are. I mean, I am. Where is my wife? I don't know. Of course I'm anxious. Anxious, annoyed. Of course you're annoyed. You're like, she said she'd be here at 10 past. It's now 20 past. She's not here.
I think you're...
so they group them together. The questions are just so meaningless because they're so general.
But they're not meaningless. They're not meaningless if they indicate to someone, gosh, I need to think about my relationship.
If they indicate that to somebody, yes.
And so that is the whole point of it, Joe. Like, there are people who don't have the knowledge or understanding of what an abusive relationship necessarily looks like. They're
completely uncritical of their relationship. They have no reflection at any time about what's going on in their relationship. I'm sure there are people like that. I mean, statistically, there must be people like that. I think there wouldn't be too many.
But there are people who do get told what to do or that they've done something wrong and they don't see it as a red flag.
That's not what that question asks.
Do you think there are right or wrong ways a woman should behave?
Yeah, it doesn't say do you tell them that. And you can't honestly say that there's no wrong way to behave in a relationship. Of course there is, for men and women. Of course there's a wrong way to behave in a relationship. I mean, so anybody who said, oh no, I don't, I think women can do whatever they like in a relationship, I mean, that's just crazy talk.
I guess, and you should feel the same. You have daughters. Like, I actually am so scared for young women who do not know what to look for as red flags.
But your daughters wouldn't be like that. I mean, none of their friends would be like that. I mean,
that is not true.
I could not tell you any young woman that I know who wouldn't know to look for red flags, like they're surveilling you, they're constantly looking at your phone. Or
I don't think you have any appreciation of the amount of interaction with phones. Like, so Snapchat, whatever, have location services. You can see where your mates are on Snapchat. It is a tool where I know in relationships people will turn off their location services to make a point. Or
what point are they trying to make?
You don't know where I am and what I'm doing?
Yeah. And where's the problem? I mean, my phone is going, my wife can see where I'm at all times. She asked me, she was like, can I do that on your phone? I was like, yeah, sure, whatever, I don't care. So she did. But again, I mean,
you're coming from a healthy relationship. I am telling you from fact that there are young people who have grown up hearing about domestic violence, who read the stories like Hannah and her children. They know that domestic violence is a problem, but they are in these relationships. And there is one that I know from one of my daughter's friends in year 12, and he was controlling and he did tell her things that she should or shouldn't do. She loved him so much that she would say, oh, but that's just him, or but I know why he's doing that.
Yeah, so she knew the behaviours,
but she didn't she
dismissed them and she minimised them. Yeah, but it's not like she didn't know the behaviours.
She didn't see herself as being in an abusive relationship.
Yeah, and reading that list isn't going to help her. She knew them already.
Why? But
you said because she minimises them. You just described she minimised them. She said, but he does that because.
She didn't like the things he was doing necessarily, but she made excuses for them. She did not see herself as being in an abusive relationship.
Sure. Yep.
But she was.
Sure. Okay. But my point is that list is so general that's not going to help her. And besides the fact that she knew the problem behaviours because she provided excuses for them. If she didn't think they were problematic, she wouldn't need to excuse them. So she knew.
She didn't see them as indicators of abuse.
But she knew that they could have been indicators of abuse, hence providing an excuse.
No, she didn't.
Well, why is she providing an excuse?
She just didn't like him telling her what to do or whatever, or turning off this or whatever. But she didn't, because I couldn't help myself, and I said to her, I think that this is a dangerous relationship. And she goes, oh, no, like, oh, he loves me. No concept in her 17-year-old mind that this was an abusive relationship. That's just one person I can tell you about. This is part of the problem. And so you take issue with this list because it's so general. What I'm saying is that is a good thing because it makes people think.
You think if this girl that you're describing read that list, she would go, her light bulb will come on
if
and she go,
If it's not her mum or her friend's mum saying, I don't think this is a good relationship for you to be in, if it's something where she's seeing things that are recognised red flags or indicators, and it makes her think, if it does that for one person and gets them out of a relationship, it is not a bad thing. If you are someone who doesn't take out the rubbish because you're in a bad mood with your partner, you'll read this list and you'll know I'm not abusive.
Okay, not based on the instructions that were given in the document. No, you wouldn't.
But this is aimed at people who are at risk.
Okay, it is so general as to be meaningless. None of you're putting your slant on it. If you just go on the words that are written there, that's absolutely.
What's my slant?
Your slant is people would know that they're not the type of people who
I've
should
said that
be,
once because you had a. You're putting yourself there
yes.
as someone who says yes to these. I'm trying to save you from yourself.
Well, you said you're going to give me the number. So apparently some, stamp liquor down in bloody South Australia will set me right.
I feel like with daughters, I would think you would be like, you can't say, like you said to me, my girls wouldn't do that. We can't say that.
I didn't say that. I said your girls would know. You said that there are people who don't know these red flags and they would learn them by reading this list of questions. And I said, I just don't believe that's the case. I think that it is so ubiquitous in our society, the kinds of red flags. I mean, just people talk, you hear the young people talking about what would you find, what do you think is a red flag in a guy? I mean, there's bloody TikToks galore that have that, Vox Pops. What's a red flag in a guy? It is
Vox Pop.
Where a person sticks a microphone in your face and asks you a question. It's so talked about now. What are red flags in relationships generally, but also in guys? I think you would have to be, as a young person, living under a rock if you didn't know at least some of the red flags that are on that list. I mean, I don't even think some of them are red flags at all.
But I think the insidious nature of DV is that the red flags, the issues, aren't there at the start. And so by the time there are things that you might question, you're in it. You love them.
Sure.
And so I think that blinds you to common sense or to your otherwise rational understanding. And so I just feel like the way to try and counteract it or to save women is through the most saturated, consistent awareness that we can possibly do. Let's educate kids in primary school about DV.
Sure.
Let's talk about things like these behaviours that might be indications of DV, because the earlier the recognition, the more you can understand, the better you'll be able to have that ability to see what's happening and to know that it's okay to take the steps to get yourself out of it. And I think that's why I liked that question. I think, sure, let's get people talking about all of this. Let's get them thinking about what might seem a very benign, nothing kind of treatment or conduct, but also in the back of your head, no, but in a different context, it could be this. So then
it's benign conduct that in a particular context could be something. I mean, that is just so, it's just so vague, so far. I mean, it's the kind of conduct that happens all the time in long-term relationships. So I don't think it helps to go with this in a certain circumstance.
But maybe saying it happens all the time in long-term relationships.
I didn't say it happened all. I think it's common behaviour. I mean, but people argue in long-term relationships.
It not wrong. You know what I mean? Like saying that it happens in a healthy relationship, like it's common. It probably is. Like, I am notoriously bad-tempered at times, but that doesn't mean it's not wrong behaviour. And so maybe that's the message here. We should all
be nice to each other. I think that's, we're just circling back around to religion now. It's like, well, how do we do that? Oh, I don't know.
Religion?
Well, that's what, most of the religions are based on this idea of teaching people good behaviour to deal with other people. Do unto others as you do to yourself. You can't, you're just coming around to a sort of a state-sponsored religion now. I mean, yeah, absolutely. People should all be nicer to each other. We should all go to whatever church or thing it is.
I don't know why we're talking about church.
Well. As I say, you're trying to make people nice to each other. Yes, everyone should be nice. We should all live in a nirvana. I think that would be lovely. How are we going to achieve that? Well, I don't know. Let's start now by doing unto others as they do to you, or any of the other those religious tenets that you can pick, not just from a Christian religion, but from Hindu, Islam, Buddhist.
I don't know. I knew that we would have divergent opinions on
But you've got to such a level of generality now that's where we're at.
We've got such an issue with domestic and family violence because it starts with the generalities. It starts with these little things. That's my point. It starts.
I'm not sure I agree with that because I don't exactly know what you're talking about. But do you think if it starts because
somebody? What do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about?
Well,
you think that
it starts with the little
things. Someone goes from "I love you so much, you're the love of my life" to choking them the next day? That's not how it works.
No,
it's
sure.
insidious and it builds up, and it is these little things. It is.
Well, it's certainly some of them. Yes, I don't think it's. I don't know. I've never made a study of it. But, as I say, those behaviours are so common in long-term relationships, people not being nice to each other, so common that the fact that they are also behaviours that occur in a relationship that ends in a domestic homicide. I mean, how does that help you identify that a domestic homicide is going to occur? I don't think it does because it occurs in so many relationships.
I think that if it can raise a query as to is this okay and get someone thinking about either the way they treat someone or the way they're being treated, then I think it's worth being general in these questions. I think it doesn't matter if it happens in other relationships because the evidence is it happens. These things happen in abusive relationships. And so if we can acknowledge that and be aware that these are patterns of behaviour in abusive relationships, ask yourself about these patterns of behaviour. If that can do anything to change the trajectory of a relationship, whether it's to get someone out of it, to change the pattern of behaviour but a man is falling into, I don't see how there's a negative. I don't think it matters if people can say, oh, these are really general questions. These happen in all relationships. That doesn't make it okay. It doesn't mean it's not a problem.
That I completely agree with what you say. If the only people who are acting on those are people who should act on them, and it only has a positive effect. But when it's so enormous and so general that it will pick up other people, there'll be complaints about this and complaints about that. Domestic violence is already absolutely choking our court system. And I don't know if you've practiced in domestic violence. I have, and I've seen many, many cases that are just people not being nice to each other. That's all it is. And there's complaints and police time is taken up and it goes into the courts and it's just people not being nice to each other. And that is not something that the courts or the police should really have anything to do with. By that I mean not violence. Most of the domestic violence stuff I do, there is no violence involved. And there's no serious manipulation or anything like it's they had an argument and they yelled at me, you know.
That's more an issue of why is that in court?
Because the legislation is so general and so broad. And so that's why I really object to the level of generality.
But I'm not talking about that case. I'm not talking about that kind of case. I'm talking about the ones that are more serious.
Of course. And if we could identify those, that'd be fantastic. And if we could design a set of questionnaire that would identify those specifically, that would be awesome. And I think we should definitely all try to do that. But I think just having this incredibly broad, incredibly general sort of criteria. I mean, what would have been more helpful is if they'd pulled out the DV legislation in South Australia, which is presumably exactly the same as Queensland, and just pulled up the examples and gone, does this happen in your relationship? Does this happen in your relationship? Does this happen in your relationship? That would be far more sensible than this, do you think there's right and wrong ways for a woman to behave in a relationship?
Okay, but so where I think where we're not seeing eye to eye here is if we're asking behaviours from the legislation, they're offences.
Not in DV. They're not. That's not an offence. It's a civil restraining order.
We've gotten to the point of actionable conduct. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. What these questions are saying is, could you be subject to, or could you be leaning towards actionable conduct? Because I don't think this is suggesting any kind of actionable conduct.
Yes, it is. Surveillance
on their own.
Yeah, surveillance is. Grabbing somebody is. I mean, yelling somebody can amount to domestic violence. There's the three off the top of my head in there that do.
But it's also, I think, aimed at trying to identify either within yourself or in your partner things that could then go to the next stage. And so if we can prevent that, then those people won't be coming to court because that won't be happening.
I completely agree. It would be excellent to keep things out of court, and it would be excellent to make sure that people are in potentially violent relationships leave them. I completely agree with all of that. I just don't agree on the mechanism. I think the domestic violence legislation is brought way too general, and I mean, this is not empirical evidence. This is just my anecdotal evidence that there are a lot of things which just shouldn't be in the court. It is just clogging up court time and police time, and I think it is because it is way too general. And then you say, oh, there's another list. It's not in the legislation. There's another list of behaviour that could lead to this behaviour that we're trying to, I mean...
But there's no suggestion that answering this questionnaire will take you to court.
Well, I'd be really curious to know what the government do when you call them up and say, I've answered the yes on this list and I need help. What do you do?
So it's part of the Don't Become That Man campaign, which is aiming to intervene and divert men away from abusive behaviour.
I think that's excellent if people have got some issues that they think... So it's not to lead
it to charges or court. It's to try and educate and prevent.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I'm not sure that list would really, pick up the kind of men you're looking for, but,
I think that they're good questions for people to consider. All right. Was there anything else? I think probably that was everything I wanted to say.
Good.
On that topic.
Okay. Well covered. It was very thorough.
And we're still friends?
Yeah, of course we're still friends. We knew when we started this podcast we didn't agree on things. That's why we did it.
Yes, true. Thank you for your very open and understanding acceptance of my position.
It's always good to talk. It's always good to talk about these things.
All right.
Thanks Lizzie. Thanks for tuning into this episode. You can find links to the cases that we discussed in the description. You can also find a link to Guardian Criminal Law, and a big shout out to them for making this podcast possible.
The majority of criminal cases involve people, normal people, people like you, people like me, who find themselves in an unusual set of circumstances that would not usually occur in their life. My name's Mark Savick and I'm here to assist you with your criminal matter. I look forward to hearing from you and being of assistance to you.
If you're interested in clips, you can look at them on Instagram and TikTok. Just search for Justice Matters Pod. See you next episode.